Edition of the PHNX D-Backs podcast right on PHNX. Of course, I'm still your mayor, PHNX, without my vice mayor, the one and only Derek Montilla. But I have found a suitable replacement. As many of you know, I am kind of just still auditioning people to replace Jesse for whenever that happens, because that's inevitable, right? But I'm very glad to be joined by Jordan Shusterman from Cespedes Family Barbecue and the Baseball Barbecast. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for stopping by. This infuriates Jesse, by the way.
Oh my gosh. You're here. Yeah, wasn't Jesse missing last time I came on too? Yeah, okay, all right. I'm not misremembering that. So
no, you're not.
I enjoy Jesse does a good job, so I don't want to do too well here, but I do appreciate the invite. I'm excited to talk snakes.
I know. Well, I fabricated an imaginary beef between the two of you, but he really does get very angry with me that you keep coming on when he's not here, because he is a huge fan of what you guys do over there. In fact, he was just telling me about listening to the Mike Farron podcast, and that's when I broke the news to him that you were coming on, and again made him very angry. But you were abandoned by Jake, I was abandoned by Jesse, so we have each other here to talk some baseball. But I did want to get your thoughts on just, you know, this offseason, the moves that have kind of happened. It's kind of been a weird offseason. We've had a lot of money spent by the Dodgers, obviously. We've had more interest, I feel like, in big deals, in like international players, than I've seen before, as far as like signing big long-term deals, and then the rest of the offseason's kind of moved slowly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. Obviously, we still have, you know, four arguably premier free agents kind of sitting out there, and it's kind of hard to find where those guys are going to land. We just keep circling back to those same handful of teams, and I think that's kind of exactly the way Scott Boras was always going to play this, once he kind of identified that that's how the market was going to act. But yeah. I mean, I'm excited to come on here and talk to about a team that, you know, has been fairly aggressive, and I would argue still has some opportunities to improve. Maybe even in the next couple of weeks, we can maybe get into that. But I do think that it's just been so refreshing and good to see them take the momentum, you know, from the postseason and carry it forward the way that you would expect most teams would do coming off of a postseason run like that. But that's not how every major league team has acted, certainly in recent years, unfortunately.
Right. And like I've said, there's times where it's kind of just almost a gesture in good faith to try to show the fans that you are building on the success, but it's not. Maybe sometimes it doesn't really seem like a real plan is there. Sometimes teams abandon the roster that maybe had success and try to upgrade and bring in bigger names. These moves feel a bit savvy that the Diamondbacks have made, and it really feels like they addressed their weaknesses that they had. They had a number of weaknesses. It's still amazing to us at times that the team made it as far as they did, you know, in the offseason or in the postseason, right? Like what they did was incredible for us that watched them all year long. It's not like they had a lot of things change, but mostly it felt like, you know, the bullpen being able to be a strength instead of a weakness was what kind of carried them over the finish line and even helped them out a lot in the postseason. But then things just seemed to go their way. That's the way it seemed to go.
Yeah. And I think that, and I do want to get to the bullpen here in a little bit, but I think, again, you contrast it to a team like Texas, who obviously ended up winning. They've been relatively quiet this winter, and you know, they are much more complete roster. Obviously, they've already spent a lot of money. They've already had, they have a really strong core, and then we see guys like Evan Carter and now Wyatt Langford coming. So like, there's a lot to, you know, look at their roster and be like, okay, there's less to fix there. But they stood pat even still more than I expected. And I know that there's, you know, TV deals hanging over all these teams, and maybe that's influencing some of the spending. But I generally think that most of that, not that it's not important and that it's not relevant. Sure. If teams want to spend, the teams are going to spend. And I think the D-backs are a team that's honestly showed us that, right? Like if they had lost to the Brewers, Would they have spent all this money this winter? I don't know. I mean, I like to think so, but I'm glad if for whatever the reason is, that's kind of the nature of ownership in baseball. Sometimes owners want to spend it, sometimes they don't, and you can't always necessarily figure out, what's gonna spark that. But for Arizona, it's definitely a fun time right now.
And I've said, like, sometimes, the spending money isn't, obviously done the right way. It's how you spend it, not how much you spend or what you spend. But like, yeah, it does feel at times like, you really don't see teams make this many improvements, especially a team like the Diamondbacks. It does feel like the postseason run had a big impact on what they were able to spend. And you're right. Like, if they would have lost to the Brewers, I don't know if they would feel like now is the time to add, being that close. And you're like, wow, we got that close with bullpen games. What if we added? What if we added an Eduardo Rodriguez? What if we gave you a third baseman instead of having it be a little rotating carousel over there with Evan Longoria being, like, at times the best third baseman that we had? So it definitely felt like that was Mike Hazen's MO, during this offseason. And I mean, obviously, Joc Pederson is the most recent move that they made to fill that DH spot. And we actually have Pederson. We got Joc Pederson's official press conference yesterday. This is what he said on watching the Arizona Diamondbacks playoff run kind of from a distance.
I think it's not a coincidence. Like, some people handle chaos better than others, and to take down the Dodgers, who was an incredible team, and then the Phillies, it is. I wouldn't say that that's luck. I think that's being able to adjust and adapt to certain situations, changes. You're down for a little bit, and somehow your guys stick together, and it's a core group of guys that really have a fight, because those are two incredible teams. So there's no one person that's leading the way. It's all 26 guys pulling on the same string with one common goal. And I think that's a lot more powerful than a lot of superstars on their team. So you can really tell that they have that, and they leave their egos at the door while having fun doing it. So it looks like they have a lot of fun on the field. And like I said, I'm excited to be a part of it and try to help in any way I can.
I really like that thing he said about the 26 guys pulling in the same direction, right? Because he has been on some big teams. He's been on teams with very high expectations, and things didn't go their way. And obviously, like, he understands that the whole thing. I mean, we kind of joke about Torey's post game speech and the connected and dangerous thing, but it's true. Like, the team being connected and being a dangerous team kind of is what feels like is different between a team like the Diamondbacks that made it as far as they did last year, and some of those teams where you go out like a Padres team or a Mets team and you spend a lot of money and you don't end up getting the results, obviously, that you were going after.
Yeah, and I think that, like, if anyone knows what he's talking about when it comes to this stuff, it's Joc Pederson. I mean, he's been in as many postseason games as almost anybody that we have, that's not on the Astros, right, or Dodgers.
Right.
We've seen him, of course, with the Dodgers for a long time. We saw what he did in Atlanta, so he understands what those teams are like. And obviously, certainly the Dodgers and Atlanta, although Atlanta had kind of an interesting group when they wanted their run in 2021, you could argue that a lot more household names on those teams compared to Arizona, but he still understands what it takes, to win in the postseason. And of course, that's the added bonus on top of what I think is a pretty impressive, regular season resume over the last handful of seasons, that Joc brings, especially bringing, a left-handed component to the lineup that I think, at times, outside, I know, of course, Ketel Marte was just a force in general from both sides of the plate, but he's generally better right-handed from what I know. And obviously you have Corbin, but that kind of left-handed power is something that I think really not only will play better in that ballpark than I think it has in San Francisco recently, but also just in general to kind of balance out that lineup. So, if the D-backs are making it to the postseason again, you're going to be like, you're looking, not that they didn't just gain all that experience together, and that's great, but Joc Pederson he's played in so many of these games, and I'm sure he misses that feeling of playing in those games, even just being away from it for a couple of years.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you're right. Like, that's something I've tried to tell, fans about, like, playing half of your games in San Francisco isn't the best for your power numbers, isn't going to sometimes show show those home runs and those numbers, but it doesn't mean it's not still there. And honestly, like, Diamondbacks fans weren't thrilled with the move. Obviously, he's he's another left-handed outfielder. Like, there is a feeling that we got already, what we had in a way in a DH, but obviously, the experience, that's something that we don't really have and that we're losing in Evan Longoria. And also the fact that Mike Hazen brought up, the middle of their lineup has gotten pretty right-handed now with Lourdes Gurriel Jr. returning. You have now Eugenio Suarez being added to the middle of the lineup. So he feels like they didn't need, and this is something he had even said before they got Joc, that they didn't necessarily need to go after a right-handed bat for their power bat. They just kind of needed to find somebody to fill that DH role. But what were your thoughts on seeing the D-backs get, Pederson and bring him in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I say, we already have it. And by the way, it still feels like there could be a trade on the, we still have McCarthy.
Yes.
We still have Dominic Fletcher. I don't know where he fits in. Alec Thomas, based on that, of course, defense and, his moments in the postseason, it's like, okay, he's clearly the center fielder, but I don't know, like, his offensive track record, obviously in the regular season is spotty at best as well. So all of that is to say, Joc Pederson is a DH. Okay. Like, we don't need to see him in the outfield, and like what he can provide offensively on a deal like this for a team that isn't going to necessarily, and I totally get wanting JD Martinez, but I think that the thing, like, the left-right balance is really important to managers. It's not just, from the front office, analytics perspective, building a lineup. Like, managers care about that. And I promise you, Torey Lovullo would love to have a lineup where he can write in more left-handed hitters. And so even if he is an everyday DH, I still like this fit a good bit. Of course, you can dream bigger with a guy like JD or Soler or of the like, but I think that this really works nicely. So again, it's still a lineup that, there are still some questions with it. Suarez, of course, as a Mariners fan, I'm awfully familiar with. I love the guy. I know the red flags. I know he's going to strike out a ton.
Yeah.
I still think it's an upgrade for what they had at third base. So that's why it's still a good move. But we'll see. It is going to be interesting to see how these guys kind of, like, what order you see those guys in. Because, of course, you have those franchise pillars in Carroll and Marte offensively. And Gabby Moreno, I'm as big a fan as anybody. I'm curious what kind of offense we can expect from Gabby in 2024. Right. So where does he fit in the lineup as well?
Well, I mean, they were like tied for 22nd in Major League Baseball in home runs last year. And again, it doesn't, this, even the Joc Pederson edition, it feels like, it's more power, but it's still like, you're projecting maybe, 20 home runs. I mean, that would be probably a fairly good projection. And still, it's not going to be the guy that completely takes over, but with kind of the balance of how many guys can get you somewhere between 20 to 30 home runs, it feels like what Pederson was talking there, more like the 26 guys all pulling in the same direction, right? But he also talked about wanting to get better and play in the outfield and play and just prove himself, also prove himself against left-handed pitching. And one of his reasons for coming to Arizona was because of Dave McKay. This is what he had to say about Dave McKay and kind of what he's been able to do for other players.
I mean, there's a lot of good outfielders that you guys have, but I think one of the main reasons their first base outfield coach, Dave McKay, I've got to know him over the years playing against, and I've heard so many good things. Seen it in action. I've seen him help a lot of guys steal a good amount of bases that aren't necessarily like speedsters. I've seen him make huge improvements in the outfield with some guys that weren't as good, and I've seen him really lock in some of the guys that are more skilled out there. So even if I don't get a lot of opportunities in the game and on the field, I'll be putting the work in with him, and then when the opportunities present itself, make the best of them and go from there.
Yeah, like that's
okay. So
right?
and I'm glad he acknowledges, like, listen, I see how many opportunities I get, defensively. Obviously, I don't think that's going to be plan A pending injury. I mean, again, it's a positions he can still play in the case of injury, and maybe you have some flexibility if you want to DH Gurriel and stuff like that. But I am so glad to hear him mention the stolen bases, because this is something we hit on when we talked about Joc signing on our podcast, which is that Joc, again, it was 10 years ago, but like Joc, when he was coming up, like he was this athletic guy who went 30-30 in AAA. He doesn't have 30 steals as a major leaguer. Okay. He stole 30 bases in AAA back when they were with Albuquerque. And now he's stolen, he basically stopped running as soon as he got to the big leagues. He's gotten bigger. He's focused on the offensive profile. I totally get that.
Right.
But if this is a guy that's going to get 500, 600 plate appearances and he's going to be on first base a lot, like, come on, Joc, you could steal 10 bases, I know that's not the biggest steal in the world, but I would love to see that.
Like, especially when you're running behind like Corbin Carroll. Like, we saw Ketel Marte not even have to try to steal bases last year because he was just, all the focus is on Corbin. So if he's on first and Corbin's taking third, he's like, I'm going to waltz into second right now is what I'm going to do, So it's like
100%.
It's funny to see players like Joc kind of see the Diamondback style of baseball and say, like, I want to play there, but I also want to play like them. Like I want to steal bases. I want to do that stuff, and I want to have more value than just being a DH. Even if he doesn't get many opportunities, that's I guess, as a fan, you can't want more than that as far as like an attitude coming into this situation.
Totally. Yeah. No, and again, like I know you look at the sprint speed and you're like, there's no way this guy's going to steal bases, and that's fine. He literally stole 0 this past season. Okay. Like his career high is like, it seems absurd for a guy who was running so much in the minor leagues. But anyway, so that's interesting. And then as for the defense, like that's just a matter of like, most DHs don't want to be DHing all the time, right? It's that simple. Sure. I mean, you look at last year, he plays 37 games in the outfield, starts 23. Like, I imagine for him, like that's the amount he wants to be out there. Is that going to work out in Arizona? Maybe, maybe not. I don't. Maybe he can become a more competent outfielder. Again, I don't think that's that important. But it was just cool and kind of funny to hear him bring up the stolen bases, because that's something I've thought about since he was a prospect.
Yeah, no, and I mean it's like I said, it's just funny to hear him bring up like wanting to work with Dave McKay. We talked about the coaching staff quite a bit. Players are huge fans of all of these coaches, right? Brent Strom, Jeff Bannister, Torey Lovullo. But Dave McKay is like one of those guys that gets a lot of credit from players that are on the team. And he's beloved throughout baseball. But you often don't hear players coming over saying like, oh, yeah, working with Dave, that's one of the things that like I really want to come over here for. And that's really cool. He also discussed wanting to work with Torey. And I think that's more understandable. Torey is just one of the most like lovable coaches in baseball. I feel like just he's the kind of manager that as a player you want to play for. And Joc expressed that here in the press conference yesterday.
I got to do a Zoom with Torey, and seems like an incredible human, a great baseball mind. I don't know. I like to do a lot of research, and I don't know. I've been fortunate enough to be with a couple different teams, and baseball's a small world, so everybody kind of knows someone or something. So ask around, and I mean, everyone loves this guy. Every single person would run through a wall for this guy, and sometimes that's a little tough, especially for a manager, because they're not necessarily everyone's best friend, because there's only 8 positions. 9 positions out there, and 26 guys on the team. So 15 of the guys don't get to play. And, sometimes some guys think they should be playing and whatnot, but I've heard he handles everything. He communicates really well. He's upfront, honest, and he wants to win. He's smart. So I'm really looking forward to playing for him, picking his brain, learning from him. So, yeah.
And again, I want to run through a brick wall for Torey Lovullo, but that's a personal feeling. So it's like to hear someone else express that, I was like, yes, same. But do you feel like that's Torey's kind of the perception of Torey outside of this team?
Totally. And like, again, talk about, stock up from the postseason. I mean, it wasn't just, the D-backs players, but I think it really gives managers an opportunity to show what they got. And of course, it's like, yeah, duh, you win a bunch of postseason series in a row. People are going to think you're a genius.
Yes.
But I know it is that simple in a lot of ways. And that can turn just as quickly. I mean, ask Torey, right? He went from there last year, right? In June, people were like, get this guy out of here. So obviously we will forever be trying to figure out, how important managers are. But in terms of the relationships, I think it does speak, though, with Joc talking about kind of checking his references and checking in with people who've worked with him, because as far as players are concerned, they don't care at all about in-game decisions. I know. And okay, let me rephrase that. That's not going to be the first thing they're thinking of when they're thinking about playing for someone, right? That's what the front office cares about. That's what the fans care about. If you're the player, it's like, do I like this guy? This is someone I want to hang out with for 6 months. And do I want to, trust, to put me in position to succeed? And in that way, I think Torey's earned a lot of respect over the course of his tenure in Arizona. And then clearly that translates to guys who are coming over to the team for the first time.
And speaking of guys coming over to the team for the first time, you are very familiar with Gino, a.k.a. Eugenio Suarez. What can Diamondbacks fans kind of expect? We know he should expect not to play 162 games in a Torey Lovullo lineup ever as a player, but what can we expect out of him as a third baseman?
I'm so glad you start there, because the two Gino stories I'll tell, one is what you just referenced, right? The 162 games.
Yeah.
And I happened to be there last year on his day off. So it was when the Mariners were on a road trip in Cincinnati, and it was, again, just a long stretch. And it was like, all right, like, it's finally time. Like, you got to take a seat. And he still ended up getting in that game, which wasn't even a competitive game. That's how he ended up at 162, but I believe he only started 161. Yeah. But the other story that's, I think, more illuminating of kind of Gino as a player and as a person, as a teammate, is something I'm looking forward to in a couple of weeks. Hopefully heading down to Arizona and covering some spring training. I remember last year showing up to Mariners camp very early in camp. I think it was before players were officially supposed to report, or position players anyway. And I happened to just be in the Mariners clubhouse when Gino showed up for the first time. And just watching him go play to every single player and reconnect and reunite, whether it was, a teammate he'd have for multiple years, whether it was just some random reliever that he was meeting for the first time. He was going around to the media members and making I can't even, it was just such a performance, but so genuine. This dude is as good as it gets in terms of in the clubhouse. And he is, as cliche as you'll hear it 100 times with the good vibes only stuff, he lives that. That is no joke.
Yeah.
He's
a real vibes guy.
Yeah, it is. It is totally authentic. And everybody loves him. But obviously it's okay, well, is he going to help the baseball team win? That is certainly what matters the most. And, it helps that, again, you're working from, all due respect to Evan Longoria and Emmanuel Rivera, this was a weak spot, right, last season, generally for Arizona, right? Absolutely. There was no doubt about it. And so I think that it helps that Gino is not necessarily coming in and needs to be the guy, right? He should be able to hit sixth, fifth or sixth or seventh. And it's possible, when he's on a heater, which you even saw last year at times, he had a stretch of 10 straight games with an RBI, which I think was a franchise record. And you're looking at me, you're like, what the hell does this guy care about RBIs for? That is not a small thing. If you are driving in runs that consistently, there is a knack to that. And I think that the power does come in spurts. Obviously, you look at the batting line and you can kind of take that away from him. And that's the thing. It's not just the strikeouts. It's that the quality of the contact has decreased slowly over the last couple of years. And I think that's where Seattle was a little bit wary of continuing on with him as their starting third baseman. But again, when you talk about the ballpark improvement, you talk about the durability, you talk about maybe even most importantly, when we talk about the overall value, Gino's played a hell of a third base last year, hell of a defender. And that's something that he didn't necessarily have points earlier in his career. And he's really brought that. So at the very least, you have a durable, really good glove at third base. It's going to hit you 25 home runs. The strikeouts are going to drive you crazy every once in a while, but it shouldn't be that important in this lineup, and that should still be a clear improvement over what they had last year.
I think the one thing that you said there that is the most important is the Diamondbacks just go through these stretches offensively where it feels like the entire team is impacted, right? And obviously, a lot of times it's the opposing pitcher that's impacting the team like that, and not just necessarily everybody in a slump at the same time on one day. But sometimes it feels like that. Like sometimes it feels like the team collectively goes through a slump, and that's kind of what's good about hearing that about Gino. Like the Diamondbacks are able to kind of manufacture some runners on base and such at times with Corbin Carroll and with Ketel Marte hitting at the top of the lineup. But then all of a sudden you'll just have the rest of the guys not be able to do anything. And like that happened far too often last year where the offense just kind of fell flat like that. That feels like a really important addition. Not to mention the fact we talked about power earlier and what Joc can do. Gino is tied for 6th in Major League Baseball in home runs since the start of 2017. Now, it's very selective going back that far, sure, but I don't care. Like
that's a big sample. That's a long time.
And that's not a guy who you typically hear of being in the top 10 for home runs in baseball like, over that period of time.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, like, you know, how much being in Seattle impacted his totals in general. But I'm glad you mentioned, you know, the style of having Carroll and Marte and guys like that at the top of the order who can make stuff happen, or Thomas sometimes. Like that's something obviously the Mariners had in Julio. But other than that, like not as much speed. Occasionally they had some of their bench infielders like Dylan Moore and Sam Haggerty and people that D-backs fans don't care about. But the point is like I can imagine Corbin Carroll and Ketel Marte, like those are exactly the kind of guys you want on base when Gino's up, you know, guy on second, you know, with 1 out or whatever. Like that's an opportunity I have seen him thrive in. But I do just think that the baseline of performance, especially when you consider the defense and the durability, is really exciting. And I think it was a great way for them to take advantage of the early stages of a bizarre offseason for the Mariners.
Yeah, it really was. And I do still have some questions for you about that. But baseball GM Elise, we don't know what baseball team she's a GM for, but we figured out she's a GM. She has to be. She knows far too much about baseball. She says addressing the black hole at third base was one of my favorite Hazen moves from the offseason. I was going to ask you, what do you think was a bigger move, bringing in Gino or bringing in Eduardo Rodriguez? Obviously, both were big needs. The Diamondbacks had a huge need to bring in another starting pitcher, but they bring in a guy that's a number 3 caliber, you know, starting pitcher in this lineup and in this starting rotation, along with Brandon Pfaadt also being kind of a number 3 caliber. So, like, obviously, both of those moves do very different things for this team. But which one do you think might have a bigger impact?
I think it's Erod. The way I've thought about him, and I know he's had some strange times. There have been some interesting situations with him on and off the field with the trade that he declined. He's had some injuries, of course. He had a very serious, you know, health issue during 2020. Like this has been a tumultuous, you know, few years for him in a lot of respects. At the same time, if we're just talking about the pitcher and the talent and what he's shown when he's been on the field, I don't think he's that different than Jordan Montgomery. I really don't. And I know Jordan Montgomery is going to get a lot more money because his agent is Scott Boras and because he just pitched at an amazing postseason. But if you, like, let's just say the second half of last season had never happened and there was no postseason. And like if we were evaluating Jordan Montgomery and Erod as pending free agents in May, I think we would be saying pretty similar things. I know Montgomery's been pretty durable, but in that sense, like I just think that the reason I say that is like I think this can be a pretty damn good deal. You know, I think that he can really be again, what I'm not saying is, I think he can be a World Series hero and carry you for 3 months like Jordan Montgomery. But again, like I just don't think the true talent level is that different, and that's why I really like this move. That's why I like them being aggressive with it early and securing that deal early on, because I just think he's a really good mid rotation pitcher, which is what I think Jordan Montgomery is. I just think he's going to get like way more money, and when you're comparing those things, I think it puts them in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, you're so right about that because again, I mean, baseball is so funny considering that we will pay a guy millions of dollars more for hitting the ball 5% more than another guy, right? And like starting pitching can be like that too. I think that I like the fact that they did it early on, but there's still like a question of if they should go after another starting pitcher. They do have Tommy Henry and Ryan Nelson, who both, you know, were very good for them at times last year in the starting pitching role. plus some other young arms that haven't had a chance to, make their major league debut yet. I mean, from your perspective, obviously, we know that you kind of just really need 4 starting pitchers when you get to the playoffs.
Or three,
or three, maybe sometimes 2 at times. I don't know, but is that a need, or do you think the Diamondbacks should just allow those young guys to kind of compete for that spot and not really address that when they still have some more positional needs to kind of fill?
Yeah, I would not consider it as much of a need. Like, I'm honestly curious about your opinion on whether they should add to the bullpen. Like, we had this heroic performance. We watched them. Because it wasn't just that at the start of the postseason, it was like, oh, well, they don't have enough starting pitching. It was like, who the hell's in this bullpen, right? And you don't got to tell me about how awesome Paul Sewald is, and I love Kevin Ginkel and some of these guys. Yeah. But like, I am kind of surprised that, and there's still a couple options out there, so maybe there is still room to add like a Ryan Brazier or like a Jake Diekman, like whatever. I'm just throwing names out there, but sure. I honestly see the bullpen as a group that, as impressive as they were, like, I don't mean it's just like, that's a group that to run that back 100% is kind of surprising to me. Yeah. Which is what I'm looking at right now. I'm looking at the depth chart and it literally looks exactly like it did in October. And I understand why it's like, oh, well, great. Well, that was the best bullpen we've ever had. So, okay, great. That's nice. But
that's
to get through. First of all, let's also remember when we talk about like the moves that they've needed to make and the reason why they were aggressive is that they weren't that good in the regular season, right? And so that's a long year to barely get into the playoffs. They had all these other things happen, and so that's where I kind of see. Not to mention the bench, and I'm sure some other spots that you could identify. So I think that letting the young guys kind of duke it out for that 5 spot feels like an okay move.
Yeah.
Not that it would be a bad idea to sign, a Michael Lorenzen or whatever, but I just think that Erod really solidifies that group, and with what we saw from Fott, like, you've got to feel pretty good about those 4, and that's most teams. Most teams right now, forget the postseason, even going into the regular season, you're really only feeling 4. Good about 4, and so not that it would be a bad idea, but I would honestly rather that. And again, some of those higher leverage guys have kind of come off the board already, but I think I would rather see them kind of bulk up the bullpen with some fresher guys there.
Well, and I think you make a good point. I think the reason why they're hesitant to address the bullpen, and I think they will. I think that the Joc Pederson move allowed them to still just have a little bit of extra money. Like, they still have Madison Bumgarner on the books. They still have some other contracts to fall off, right? And I think that's why even though they spent the money they did, they still have to be a little conservative, at least this year. The bullpen, though, kind of came together late. And the additions of Ryan Thompson, calling up Andrew Saalfrank, those 2 guys were excellent. I don't know if Saalfrank is the success he had is sustainable. It didn't appear, based on his peripherals, that it was a sustainable success. Ryan Thompson was different because he was DFA'd by the Marlins, and when the Diamondbacks picked him up, his stats didn't look great, but then you look back and you're like, well, he didn't pitch a lot of innings, and he really just had 2 bad games that ballooned up his ERA and made things look worse. The Marlins obviously had a lot of things going on, so there were things that they could do. But like, there was something about when Ryan Thompson came over that I think, and they credited like the entire bullpen for the fact that it was a lot of different looks, a lot of different arm angles, just a lot for an opposing team to have to deal with when they're changing those guys out. The biggest thing though was Paul Sewald. Paul Sewald coming in, and I mean, it's not just his ability to close games. It's not just his, how talented he is. It's like, once Paul Sewald came over, everybody else knew their role, and it had everybody chill out. Like, we talked to a couple of different guys from the bullpen, and they kind of had the idea of, like, they didn't know what on any given night when they were going to be called on to go in the ninth, especially with Torey Lovullo doing this bullpen by committee thing. So it was just an uneasy feeling for them. They had no idea what they would be utilized or when they would be utilized. Once Sewald came in, and once the guys were having the success, Ginkel found the success he had, it's like everything just kind of fell into place within like 2 weeks of him being there. And I get it. Like, you probably still want another left-handed pitcher in the bullpen, but like the setup that they have right now, like you said, is the best bullpen they've ever had. They've never had a bullpen they could rely on in this way, almost historically in this franchise's existence. It feels different, and I think, like, again, that was why Torey, especially in Brandon Pfaadt starts during the postseason, was so quick to call on them. He trusted them so much, and he believed that they could get him, through any game at any point. Obviously, didn't always work out, especially there in the World Series with Sewald. But again, this is just a bullpen. I think that they pitched a lot during October. They pitched a lot during September. So they had a lot asked of them, and they delivered for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think that an addition is probably still on the horizon for this team.
Yeah, I think that's the way I look at it. Is if you're sold on Sewald and Ginkel, like, hell yeah, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of guys to get through the season, and again,
it.
going back to the postseason, the World Series. Obviously, the Rangers had a lot of the same questions going into their postseason run, and it required some heroic performances from Leclerc and from Josh Sborz, and even Chapman with the ridiculous up and down that he had. And we wondered, okay, would they make a move? And we see them go out and get it like a David Robertson type. David Robertson, signing him. And again, do I expect the D-backs to give a reliever or $11 million? No, right? Like, obviously, that's another one of the strengths of this bullpen is how cheap it is, right? That's good. Like, that's not a bad thing. Yeah, and that's fine. And the other thing is, you can always say is just like, hey, maybe Ryan Nelson is a badass reliever. Like, we don't know yet, right? And that's possible that he can settle into that role, and someone else ends up winning that 5 spot. Maybe you sign a start or whatever. So I do think that there's just room to add on the pitching side here, likely in the bullpen. And again, a lot of guys have come off the board over the last few weeks in the relief market, but I could imagine, like you said, that them making at least another move or two.
Well, we appreciate you guys being here right now on the PHNX Sports YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to do so now. Sign up for notifications. That way you don't miss whenever we go live. Leave us a like. We always appreciate that. Gabby will tell you to drop a like at some point during the show. Won't be right now. It'll be when you least expect it. But of course, if you're listening on the audio podcasting side, make sure you subscribe over there as well. Leave us a review. We always appreciate those 5-star reviews. Of course, when the barbecue boys come out, we're going to take them out to Someburros to get some burritos for sure here in town. It's one of our new partners. They are incredible. It's a family-owned and operated Mexican food restaurant. One right by my house. I'm very lucky they just put one in, and so I get to reap the benefits of not having to drive very far. But it's incredible food, and of course they can cater any party that you have with their fiesta platter loaded with mouth-watering red and green chili beef mini chimneys, homemade taquitos, chips, fresh guac, and more. So make sure to check out Someburros. They have locations throughout the valley and Flagstaff. You're never far from delicious, time-tested Sonoran-style recipes. Check out their new locations in Goodyear, Peoria, and I-17, and Jomax, by the way, or visit Someburros.com to find one near you. Let Someburros cater your next meal, big or small. Order online or find one near you by visiting Someburros.com. And we also have Game Time, by the way, which is the best place to get baseball tickets, especially last minute. You don't want to you don't plan sporting events very well. They just come up, especially a lot of 81 baseball games in your city. You're never going to be able to plan all of those. So get your tickets last minute with Game Time. It is the place for last minute ticket deals, and it's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download their app, create an account, and use code PHNX for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHNX for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. So I guess the big question for me, besides what the hell is Jake doing going to a football game in the UK? Like, what are you
doing?
He's
in Manchester. Yeah.
All right. I'll forgive him then. But overall, I mean, hypothetically, if you were an NL West fan here, what are your feelings about, the moves the Dodgers make, and how do you cope with them? Do you say, wait until I actually see this, or do you just get into a fetal position under your desk and cry?
Okay. So there is an element of it that is impossible to ignore. And it's not just like, oh my God, they're spending more money than we've ever seen, and now they have Ohtani and blah, 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 blah. But it's also like just knowing how good the infrastructure is.
Yes.
That like,
it's infuriating.
that's the part that would drive me crazy, right? It's like, okay, great. Now we know they're spending to levels we've never seen before, deferrals or not. But like James Outman, That he was like one of their best players last year. So if they're going to keep churning those guys out, then you are maybe having some trouble. Now, and the reason I say that is because James Outman makes me think that if right now, if you look at the Dodgers, like upper levels, it's about as thin as it's been for a very long time.
Yes.
Now there's some lower level prospects that are going to end up on top 100 lists if they're not already there now, but in the next calendar year, and you're going to be like, oh,
there they
great.
go.
You know, here they go.
Yep.
But like, if you look at AA and AAA now, it's not quite as stacked. And so the depth is maybe not as much there as it's been, in my opinion, in terms of like the youth and the depth. Now, again, that's while saying that like that doesn't mean that there's not going to be some dude that pops up from AAA that isn't on a prospect list. That's going to be awesome because that's how the Dodgers work. Yeah. I understand that it's got to be exhausting and difficult. At the same time, I mean, if you can imagine how sweet it was to kick their ass in October, now it's just elevated times a billion, right? And so, I mean, it's just, and that's baseball. And by the way, that applies to the regular season as well. Yeah. You know, because listen, am I going to pick against the Dodgers in the regular season? No, obviously, right? But like even individual series, it's just they have brought that on themselves where it's like people are expecting, okay, we go ahead, go win 120 games. If not, you're a disappointment. Right. And that's absurd for any baseball team, no matter how famous their lineup is. So I'm excited to watch it. I think it's good for baseball from the standpoint of like people are going to be more compelled to see them lose as much as to see how good they are.
Yeah.
They're a draw. I understand.
If your team is playing them, you want to go see the Dodgers and you want to see your team kick their ass, you know, but it's also a matter of like there's enough players on this team that you want to see. Like, I don't know another franchise in baseball that could have survived losing the caliber of pitchers they've lost due to scandals, due to players behaving badly outside of baseball and still have been the team that they were, still bring in guys like David Peralta, you know, and have them contribute, still have guys like, still have a team full of guys that like you look at on paper and you say, this lineup does not scare me at all, and have those guys still win 100 games, right? That's the impressive thing, especially about last season. I gave them a ton of credit for that because I don't know a lot of teams that could lose a Julio Urias and a Trevor Bauer in the years that they have recently and still just kept things moving on. And all right, well, we'll bring up another young guy. We'll bring up another young guy. And oh yeah, we lost this guy due to injury. We lost that guy due to injury. All right, well, we'll keep, you know, like most teams would have been decimated last season and the Dodgers still found a way to win. I mean, the satisfaction in the playoffs of beating them was the best thing ever, especially when they really started to click late on and they just kind of ran away with the NL West. But it you know, you're right. It's that's the one thing is that in the playoffs, it felt so good to finally, you know, beat them and beat them so soundly, right? That was something that every Diamondbacks fan needed to see.
Wasn't even close. I mean, they just whooped on them real quick, and it was and honestly, I mean, if it wasn't already true, that's what most of America will be rooting for, right? In future. Now I will say. And I know that I'm obviously generally going to be player positive no matter what. Ohtani's approval rating is pretty high. Like, I can't imagine. I know that this signing with the Dodgers does make him less likable in theory, but like, I think for the most part, neutral people will be rooting for Ohtani, especially since he's never been in the postseason. But beyond that, I mean, just with the amount of success that they've had, I think it's just it's going to be something to behold. So,
they're the least hateable super team ever. Mookie Betts,
and
Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani. Like, these are guys. I love these guys.
And even like Yamamoto now. Like, I want Yamamoto to be awesome, you know? Like, I'm not rooting for that. Too. Like, there's all of this. There's so many versions of that. So, again, I understand, like, there's some, and of course, you know, Padres fans don't want to even, they're giant people. I get it. I know that there are, most fans harbor a lot more sports hate than I do. So I get it. And I'm not going to tell fans how to be, but I do agree with your point that in general, even over this whole run, it's been hard to hit, but now it's just with the spending and with just kind of the super team element, but that's what they bring on. And like, that's with that roster, you know, comes that quote unquote burden, and that's fine. That's not a bad thing for baseball at all.
I got a couple more baseball moves for you before we let you go, but the Orioles were sold reportedly yesterday, or are being sold by the Angelos to a group led by a couple of billionaires, and people are very excited about it. Orioles fans are very excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, what a time to sell this team, right? Like the future couldn't be brighter for that organization right now. So, I mean, like talk about like selling high. That's a great thing for an estimated $1.725 billion. But what does this mean for Orioles fans? Like, and why do we immediately assume that new billionaires coming in, replacing the old billionaires, are going to somehow be better billionaires?
We shouldn't assume that. So very fair question.
See the
I
A's
also
situation, right? The Oakland
I will also somewhat punt this answer to Friday when Jake Mintz, my podcast co-host and Orioles fan, lifelong Orioles fan, will be able to speak on this much more directly and personally.
For sure.
But you mentioned what a time to sell, what a time to buy, right? I mean, this is
what a time to buy,
right? Yeah, I mean, this is as bright as the future could be. Now, it's not like we haven't seen the Orioles spend. But that was more under Peter Angelos than John. John, who's been running the team more so recently, a lot more frugal. And so, yeah, it's a huge deal, right? And maybe honestly, to tie it back, like again, we don't. It's so early in this process, and knowing how much the new owners are going to spend, who knows, right? But in theory, if there's more flexibility and more willingness to go, it's what we just talked about with the Dodgers. The infrastructure that Mike Elias has built in Baltimore is about as good as you could possibly hope. And it's not just the fact that they have drafted high, but to nail basically all of those picks and then to have the farm system and the kind of the player development apparatus that they have that's terrifying, right? If you're talking about, if you're in the AL East and, oh my God, what happens when the Orioles spend? Yeah. I'm not saying they're the Dodgers and, we're not bringing in Guggenheim and, having $300 million payrolls, but even $150 million is going to go a long way for a team that is already in quite a healthy position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, ownership's just such a thankless position because no matter what, like people just think you have like the worst intentions, and like when you're a new owner, it's exciting. The future is the possibilities are endless. You're going to come in here and you're going to do all these great things, and then you're around for 5 years and we hate you and we want to come with pitchforks and torches.
Steve Cohen is a pretty hilarious example, right? I mean, he comes in and does spend all the money and they suck. And it's like his approval rating is still pretty high because there's so much confidence in the willingness to spend and all that stuff. But that said, don't feel bad for owners ever.
No.
No. let's not get too out of whack there. But I agree with your point though. It's like, especially like the expectations when you have a quote unquote bad owner that's on the way out and you're just like, oh, it's a miracle. This next guy will be perfect. And it's like, let's see.
No, that moves your team to Las Vegas. That's what happens. But speaking of ugly situations, we got one more thing before I let you go. And this was a potentially leaked picture of the Philadelphia Phillies City Connect jersey. And I'm not sure if you have had a chance to see this yet, but what are we doing? What are we doing here? If this is real, what are we doing here with this? This is pretty like, okay, I am fine with crazy color combinations, but this is a Brewers jersey. This is a Brewers jersy. You could have done this in Kelly green and had it kind of be an Eagles kind of thing. There's a lot of options you could do, but I mean, like anything, because Philly is such a big sports town that I think you could have instantly been a hit with any kind of like orange, Flyers type colors or maybe any Eagles colors. But what are we doing here?
One of my favorite people, one of my good friends, Matt, is a huge Phillies fan, and he texted me this picture and said, "This would infuriate me if it's real, giving me 12U travel ball vibes." So I think that kind of sums it up on top of your point, which is that just like, how would you ever know this was Philadelphia?
Right. Like,
so I think maybe if we're talking about it as City Connect, like, I don't know how this is connecting to the city, which brings me to I actually don't believe this is real. So that's where I'm
okay. All right. There we go.
I don't know what, if I'm wrong, like I have no idea how this stuff gets out or who makes up, like if it's like, I have no idea.
Right.
But it's like so far, like just bizarre. Like it looks like it's like Harry Potter font. Like
it's really weird.
Really weird. So
you nailed it. It is Harry Potter font. I was like, haunted house font was what I was thinking, but Harry Potter font is much more on brand. Like, I mean, again, I know we go far out there with like the City Connect stuff, and like
which is fine. Yeah, which is fine. Like I'm fine getting goofy with the jerseys.
Yeah.
I'd rather that than like the complete nothingness that we get for the Dodgers and like the Giants, who like barely change anything about their uniforms, or the Cubs, right? Like I'd rather get weird with it. But this is just so far away from anything that you'd expect that it's hard to take seriously.
Okay, if it is real, I have to ask you, what's uglier, that or what we might think might be Joc Pederson's new cybertruck? Do we have that from Instagram? He posted this a few days ago, and
this is definitely real.
I'm not sure if this is actually his or not. But I mean, you don't post a picture of a Cybertruck in a driveway and then not have it actually.
I would guess this is, not that I know Joc Pederson that well. I would guess this is real.
I don't know if this should be concerning or not. Like, I don't want to judge a person. It's definitely going to be a car that stands out in the player parking lot, because aside from Ketel Marte, all of our guys seem very conservative on their choices of vehicles.
Yeah, think about it this way. When you have the money that you have as a major leaguer, this doesn't need to be your only car. Right.
Yeah, okay.
And so I can imagine a big leaguer like Joc Pederson just being like, hey, I wonder what that's like. Let's get it. You know, like
an invincible truck.
It's not like I'm like, this is my car now. Right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is going to be driving that all year, but
that's incredible.
I do believe it is his.
Yeah.
Not that that's like sourced. I just do believe Joc Pederson would buy one of these.
Okay. Yeah.
And, but I'll let you know if I go to D-Bag Spring Training. I'm sure you'll be there too.
I will see.
We'll have to scout out the parking lot and see if we see it there.
For sure. You're not going to be able to hide that. We're going to see it wherever it's at. So, Jordan, I appreciate you stopping by, man. I look forward to having you on again when Jesse isn't here. And I know it's just going to infuriate him more. No, we actually, we got to get you and Jake on when Jesse's here for sure, because we love you guys. We appreciate you for coming on, and thank you for doing what you have done for as long as you've done it for.
Absolutely, and let's be in touch when I'm out in Arizona. Maybe we can go grab some burritos, make something happen. Because I have more D-backs like thoughts and questions, but I'll save them for Jesse.
Let's go. Yeah, he's probably the person to ask about that. I could talk to you about casting the Diamondbacks movie and other joking snake related stuff, but no, Jesse will be the brains around here. But again, man, thank you so much for stopping by.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, we'll see you next time. Again, I really just did that, as everybody knows, to drive Jesse nuts. I mean, I don't mean to make it sound like I used Jordan in this case, because he's a tremendous individual, a great baseball mind, and one of the best people I could have co-host with me. However, most of the things I do are motivated by upsetting Jesse Friedman, and that one was definitely one of those decisions. But again, if you want to check out other things that might infuriate Jesse, or at least make him question their decisions, make sure not miss any of his content. Check out Jesse's articles. Become a diehard today. You'll get access to everything Jesse has to write. You will get access to our Discord lounge, which is the best place to be an Arizona sports fan. So much more, including a free t-shirt from PHNXlocker.com. As you know, you get access to all of our wonderful event discounts and discounts with our partners, and so much more fun stuff. So remember, next week we're going to have our first edition of Squeeze Play, which is our diehard only game show on the Discord. I will be hosting that. Cogs is one of our first contestants. We need two more.
Are you wearing a bow tie?
I'm not going to wear a bow tie. I'm going to wear a tie. I'm going to wear a tie.
Bow ties are more fun.
A t-shirt and a tie.
But bow ties are more fun.
You're right. If we get Ken Rosenthal on this show, I will wear a bow tie. 100%. I will absolutely wear a bow tie.
Will you dye your hair lime green?
That's the Ken Rosenthal has normal colored hair. I don't know why. Why do I have to dye my hair lime green if we get Ken Rosenthal? Just because Gabby jumps off a bridge doesn't mean I'm going to dye my hair green.
Lourdes has purple hair, so you got purple hair.
Look, I made a bet, a foolish one, one that I regret very much so, and my scalp does to this day. But that doesn't mean I'm just going to go around crazily dyeing my hair and offering bets to get sexy red tattooed on me.
But what is up with people and tattoos in this office, or affecting permanent change?
It's mostly because I'm a 42-year-old man and I don't have much time left. So offering to mark up my body is really just, honestly, that's the thing. That's the thing that doesn't impact me that much, but people think is crazy. But meanwhile, Max is out here not getting his tattoo.
You at least have 5 years.
If I drink enough water,
sure.
And maybe if I eat more OGs, maybe, because people are like, eat less OGs. I say, Eat more OGs is what I say. OGs has launched 2 brand new products to make my life better and make your life better. If you are vegan, there's the OGs vegan with live rosin in it. It's called OGs Naturals. You also have the big OGs, which of course is the thing everybody's talking about. Everybody's making weird accusations that I'm eating one whole that's 100 milligram piece in one sitting.
You definitely did.
It's perforated. And it could be eaten in like over time, or much like a pizza is perforated, you can fold a pizza in half and just eat it as a large calzone, right? It's up to the buyer on how they choose to use it. But regardless of how you eat your big OGs, make sure to check them out. They are a mega version of Peg's Raspberry Orange RSO, one of the company's most popular products, which I'm a huge fan with. Sometimes people have had problems with edibles not working for them, especially if you've had if you have an appendectomy or you've had your gallbladder removed. I found out that these things impact your ability sometimes to process distillates. I don't know. I'm not saying that's right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So Rick Simpson oil actually is like an alternative. It's made in a different way. And sometimes if you haven't had success with edibles, Rick Simpson oil might be the way for you to go. But to learn more about OG's gummies and where you can find them, head on over to ogsbrands.com. And of course, tell them Derek sent you, because they'll be like, hey, the guy that eats the big ones by himself. We like that guy. Also, BetMGM. I don't know who's doing bets around here with Damon not around, but make sure that if you can get some betting sources, I
think Espo's about to do it after this show.
Send Damon a tweet asking him for his best bet projections. And then you can go over to BetMGM Sportsbook right now. Sign up using our code of PHNX, and you will get $158 in bonus bets instantly, simply for making your first bet of $5 or more. It has to be at a standard odds price, but once you do that, that $158 will be deposited as a bonus bet into your account, regardless of the outcome of your wager. Right now, there are some incredible opportunities over there at BetMGM. They have an NBA 33% boost right now that boosts your extra winnings 33%. NHL, they got a 25% boost. So get down on those boosts. If you're making a bet, can add on. And of course, if you win, it'll just make the winnings that much sweeter. Sign up for BetMGM right now and use bonus code PHNX. Place your first BetMGM Sportsbook wager through the mobile application for at least $5. You will receive $158 instantly in additional winnings, regardless of your wager's outcome. Check out the show notes for full details. And now listen to Damon. Is it Damon? Talk about the disclaimer.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 New York. Call 1-800-327-5050 Massachusetts. 21 plus to wager. Please gamble responsibly. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP Arizona. 1-800-BETS-OFF Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 Puerto Rico in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Visit BetMGM.com for terms. This promotional offer is not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico. Elise is attacking my pronunciation of perforated because I said
your
perforated.
Pronunciation?
Okay, English is my second language, so you guys are all committing a hate crime right now. I'm just telling you that. I am just telling you that. This is a hate crime. Perforated. And it is...
for all the time that you spent in Puerto Rico?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was my primary language, which I don't speak Spanish anymore very well at all. But, of course, tomorrow Jesse will be back to also antagonize me about how I pronounce words. And I will also have a chance to... I don't know. Do this one more time.
Welcome him with a warm embrace. Give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds to cue this up. I tried to keep this a secret.
I'm not look, I'm not trying to say that I need to hug Jesse when he comes back. That's definitely the opposite of what I want to do, but he will be back tomorrow. We have lots of fun stuff planned, like I said, including the upcoming game show that we're going to have, Squeeze Play. Jesse's very curious as how that works, and I'm not telling him either, but make sure if you are a diehard, you stop by for that. We have all sorts of other stuff planned. A big part about being a diehard is telling us what you guys want to do. So make sure you drop in the Discord, maybe some games that you would want to see us schedule some takeovers for this season, because we usually do the scheduling kind of like, a blind rat. We just kind of whatever, this one, that
like
one, this
Rat
one.
Leon?
Yeah, like Rat Leon. Yeah, of course. But your input is always valued, of course. Also, Jacob and I were talking about, what days you guys want us to do this show once the regular season starts. So never forget that the Discord.
You cannot vote for all post games.
Oh, yeah, that's Jesse. He's telling that to Jesse. He's not telling that to you guys. I know you guys are understandable that we can't do every post-game show throughout a 162
It's
game
162
season. But Jesse doesn't
playoffs was
understand that.
enough.
He doesn't understand. Oh, yeah, trust me. I'm still recovering from the playoffs. I believe at one point I drank an entire bottle of champagne and took my shirt off. But, of course, that exists. And since that exists, and since I'm not going to have a chance to play this without him stopping me, let's get Jesse doing the Greg Schulte thing one more time in here. Can we, Jacob?
Should Mark Grace and Darren Sutton welcome a young Greg Schulte into the broadcast booth? Greg Schulte and Tom Catiani welcoming you into our Arizona Diamondbacks broadcast booth here at Chase Field. Paul Goldschmidt's going to be the first batter up against John Qualls, the former Diamondback, and he comes in to replace Corey Lukey for San Diego. First pitch from Qualls on the way to Goldie, and that's a strike on the inside corner, 0-1 the count. Goldie on the season with 7 homers and 19 runs batted in. The stretch and the pitch by Qualls. And there's a drive! Way back to right field. That ball is way out of here. You can't touch him out, Paul Goldschmidt, as he hits a long home run to deep right field to give the Diamondbacks a 4-3 lead over the San Diego Padres. Yep, I think so.
He's never going to go on vacation ever again. He's not going to be in this room with me. Of course, I had to get that in one more time. Ernesto asked, was this filmed last week? No, that was filmed in 2021, obviously. So shout out to my co-host. Can't wait for him to be back. But in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter. I am at cap_caveman with a K. If you want to follow him, he's at Jesse N. Friedman. Of course, on the ones and twos today is Jacob Franklin, a.k.a. Faj. You can follow him at Jacob_Franklin4 because he's the 4th best Jacob Franklin in existence. Our show is at PHNX_DBacks, but of course, all roads lead to at PHNX_sports on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Please don't tell Jesse that I started this show too late 2 days in a row. He'll be very upset with me. But in the meantime, we thank you guys so much for stopping by. We appreciate you. And remember, kids, baseball is fun, but it is so much more fun when Jesse is on vacation.
We all silly like the mayor.